So let's jump right into it. Our first reader tonight is Mr. Scott Smith, who has two jobs at present. The one he gets paid for in dollars, which involves digital strategy at Chicago Magazine, and you may see him on TV or hear him on the radio talking about that every once in a while. The one he gets paid for in experience in graying hair involves parenting his daughter Abigail with his wife Erin. The limited time he has left in the day is usually spent on Twitter, metaphorically framing life events in terms of comic books or West Wing episodes. And I'd like to also add that he is a founding member, with me, of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen of Leisure, which I think might be on hold for the next 18 years or so. We'll have to see about reconvening that. Please give a big Tuesday Funk welcome to Mr. Scott Smith.
Perfect. I didn't think you were going to sit there the whole time. I was a little worried. How are we distracting? So as Bill mentioned in the intro, I am the father of a 2-year-old daughter. Or I'm sorry, a 2-month-old daughter. Wishful thinking. So ever since my wife and I found out that we were having a girl, I've been a little obsessed with how we might raise her in a pink is for girls, blue is for boys culture. My hope is we'll raise our daughter to figure out her own identity and pursue her own likes and dislikes, irrespective of the expectations of others. And I realize this is akin to saying, and hopefully she will someday own a unicorn. But that's my fault. My biggest concern has been with the color pink and the princess culture that seems to accompany it. Everyone in this room looks pretty intelligent, in addition to being incredibly good looking. So I don't need to go into all the pitfalls here. Suffice it to say, I don't want to raise a daughter who expects to be saved by a handsome prince. Frankly, thanks. I'd be happy if the sum total of my daughter's experiences with princesses involved getting to the end of a level on Super Mario Bros. And getting annoyed because the princess she is looking for is in another castle. But I realize some of the girly pink stuff is going to be inevitable. My wife once told me our daughter might like pink and Barbies, in a tone that left unsaid the words, and that's okay, as well as, and you might just have to suck it up and deal. I'm certainly wary of burdening her with all these expectations I have. If she's going to be her own person, then I need to tread lightly, lest I send her running into the Disney princess section of Toys R Us, only to have her emerge covered tiara to toe in wee royal garb. This has not, however, stopped me from trying to introduce alternative options, even at this young age. When I first got out of college, I was a substitute teacher, and the classes ranged from about 1st grade to 8th grade. And I learned that when I was trying to correct the behavior of the younger kids, it wasn't enough to tell them not to do something. You have to redirect their undesired behavior into something positive. So if one of your charges was getting into an argument with another kid, you would break it up, but then say, walk them over to the bookshelf and have them pick out a book. Obviously, the surest way to get a kid interested in something is to, in some way, suggest that it is somehow bad. So merely suggesting princesses are dumb isn't going to work. So if the dominant societal culture dictates that my daughter is inevitably going to gravitate to women in unrealistic costumes with fanciful backstories, who operate from positions of authority steeped in tradition, and also want to own various dolls or other branded merchandise derived from images of those women, is it possible I could get her into comic book superheroes instead? Now, the plan was to acquire 5 appropriately iconic comic book covers featuring female superheroes and use them as art in our daughter's room. My hope was that the imagery would carry with it a certain magisterial air that would seem an acceptable substitute for the elaborate sashes and gowns of princesses. And as she grew up, my daughter would inevitably have questions about these characters, and we'd share their stories, discuss their heroics, and in doing so, gently reinforce the values of self-reliance, sacrifice, and adventure, all of which seemed to run counter to princess culture. And eventually she would decide, for herself, that superheroes were cool and princesses drool. Now I know what you're thinking. Scott, this all sounds kind of sneaky. To which I respond, yes. Yes, it does. Anyway, I realized early on that this wasn't a perfect alternative. There's plenty of problematic imagery, particularly when it comes to women in comic books. So I came up with a list of traits that would help guide me to the responsible choices. Fair warning to the non-geeks in the audience, this next bit is going to get super nerdy. So if the last thing you saw involving someone in a cape was Phantom of the Opera, now might be a good time to go get a drink from the bar or maybe hit the bathroom. So rule number 1 was easy does it on the cleavage. Obviously, female superheroes are going to have boobs. And, you know, for whatever reason, a predominant number of them have large boobs. Clearly for women who are predisposed to saving the earth, there is some kind of correlative genetic marker for large breasts. There doesn't seem to be much of a way around this, but I figure it can at least be managed, so I resolved to favor women who wore shirts, jackets, jumpsuits, or perhaps battle armor. It also meant Power Girl wasn't making the cut. Number 2, each character should have her own identity and not be derivative of a male character. Now, this would seem to knock out some perfectly acceptable options. Batgirl, She-Hulk, Mary Marvel. But you know, it seemed to run counter to the whole exercise if the entire list suffered from Miss Pac-Man syndrome, and my daughter equated female identity with little more than lipstick, false eyelashes, a beauty mark, and a hair accessory. As an aside, how many people remember Miss Pac-Man had a mole? Weird, right? It's just weird. Rule number 3. No one with a "and then she was evil" plotline. It would have been really great to put Jean Grey on my daughter's wall, a female hero whose greatest power derived from the use of her mind. Perfect! Up until the point where she turns evil, becomes Dark Phoenix, and commits genocide by wiping out an entire planet. Rule number 4. Pants are preferable to no pants. I felt we were doing our daughter a disservice if we suggested to her that the world at large is okay with a young woman who parades around in underpants and fishnets. We'd really just be setting her up for 2 possible careers, pop singer or magician's assistant. I'm not saying either of those is bad, it just seems kind of limiting. So this meant Black Canary was out, and so was Zatanna, who I think is an actual magician's assistant at some point. The corollary to this rule was that shorts were acceptable. So obviously the X-Men's Jubilee was a possibility. Then again, I had to ask myself whether I wanted to endorse jean shorts as a fashion choice. So when I got down to making my list based on these rules, I found sticking to them was pretty much impossible. Even my wife thought I was being a little too restrictive. On the turning evil issue, she said, I think it's okay to have been evil at some point. There is an important lesson there. Everyone gets to make mistakes. No one is born perfect, and we all get a shot for redemption and triumph. What I realized by trying to shield my daughter from pantsless, bosomy, infrequently evil characters, I was going to prevent my daughter from figuring out why these rules were important all on her own. By creating a set of rules about what was okay, I was working against my own efforts to instill in her a contrarian spirit. Or as my friend Veronica put it when I was discussing my efforts, well-behaved women rarely make history, and this covers not wearing pants. So finally I came around to the notion that it's okay that Wonder Woman isn't usually wearing pants, because she's otherwise seen as a strong, powerful person. There might not be Supergirl if it hadn't been for Superman, but that doesn't mean she's any less dedicated to truth, justice, and the American way. And Buffy Summers saved the world a lot, even if she once had to kill her vampire boyfriend to do it. So all 3 of them made the list. Rounding out the top 5 were the Invisible Woman from the Fantastic Four, and Elastigirl from the Incredibles. Both are mothers with a strong sense of family, and I figured it was valuable to teach my daughter that moms are superheroes too. After all this, I'm not sure the problem I originally set out to solve is worth fixing. There's plenty that's problematic about Disney princesses, but there's also Princess Leia and Xena Warrior Princess. And if we're otherwise smart about how we raise our daughter, then she won't need her father to save her any more than she'll need a prince to do so. She'll make her mind up all by herself, though I still think she's going to be heartbroken when she finds out we won't let her leave the house pantsless.